I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to get started this morning with the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee and a substantial show of party unity for former President Trump.
Several of his primary rivals came together on the second night of the convention. That included Mr. Trump's chief challenger, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. She was the last Republican to suspend their campaign for president, staying in the race until March, long after others had dropped out, and declining to immediately endorse Trump after ending her campaign. But during her speech last night, Haley struck a very different tone, throwing her support behind her former rival.
I'll start by making one thing perfectly clear. Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period. I'm here tonight because we have a country to save. And a unified Republican Party is essential for saving her.
Today, Vice Presidential nominee JD Vance will headline day 3 of the GOP convention. The Ohio senator will speak to Republican delegates and to the nation tonight.
Meanwhile, senators are planning to hold a teleconference today to discuss last weekend's assassination attempt against the former president. The call is expected to include briefings from the Secret Service and the FBI.
We have full coverage ahead this hour, including international reaction to the GOP convention, plus the latest on the FBI investigation into the assassination attempt of the former president. Let's begin with NBC's Garrett Haake, who joins us from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Garrett, good morning. So last night, the Republican Party closed ranks around the nominee as formerly fierce rivals of Donald Trump stood before the delegates and embraced him. Walk us through the highlights of the second day of the convention.
Yeah, good morning, Joe. There was a lot of energy in this building last night, really throughout the course of the events. The official theme was Make America Safe Again, with a focus on crime and on immigration, two of Donald Trump's pet issues, if you will. But the secondary theme was definitely something to the effect of you can come home again, or that the MAGA movement would welcome the converts. We saw that from so many of the speakers last night, whether it was Marco Rubio, who ran against Trump in 2016, to his 2024 primary rivals, all of whom have since bent the knee and come back and endorsed Donald Trump in one form or fashion or another, trying to tell people who might be skeptics of him still in the party, or perhaps independents or undecided voters out there, come on in, the water's fine. Here's some of what we've heard last night from some of those former Trump rivals turned backers.
You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. I haven't always agreed with President Trump. But we agree more often than we disagree.
My fellow Republicans, let's send Joe Biden back to his basement, and let's send Donald Trump back to the White House.
Donald Trump is the president who will actually unite this country, not through empty words, but through action.
Those endorsements from former rivals meant to be kind of an olive branch to particularly Republicans out there who, for whatever reason, find Mr. Trump distasteful or weren't necessarily ready to vote for him, saying, come on back in, the party needs you, Joe.
Hey, Garrett, it's Savannah. I want to ask you about something that we saw happen on X. Third-party candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's apologizing after his son posted a video there showing a phone call between Kennedy and Mr. Trump on Sunday. This was a day after the assassination attempt. Tell us what we learned about their call, but then also the state of the relationship between these two candidates.
Yeah, this was a wild little story that blew up for a while yesterday morning, in which Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s son posted this video on X of the phone call between RFK Jr. and Donald Trump the day after the assassination attempt, in which Trump is heard talking in sort of a strange way about vaccines. It's a pet issue for RFK Jr., who's a vaccine skeptic. He believes in a number of conspiracy theories about vaccines. The video was quickly pulled down, and RFK Jr. apologized, saying that a documentary film crew had been working with him behind the scenes, that he didn't even know this video existed. But the nature of the call is interesting in and of itself, because here you hear Donald Trump and RFK Jr. kind of playing footsie on a conspiratorial issue here in a way that Donald Trump never talks about it in public. Remember, Kennedy's presence on ballots in a lot of these states is one of these things that's kind of an X factor in this whole race. Having a third-party candidate, someone with the name Kennedy, is thought to be in many corners something that could hurt Joe Biden. So the idea of Trump staying cozy with Kennedy here behind the scenes is just one of those fascinating subplots that we're going to need to watch as we get into the fall of this election.
Garrett, let's quickly look ahead to day 3 of the convention. It's going to be highlighted by newly minted VP nominee, Ohio Senator JD Vance. He's given a speech tonight. A lot of Americans don't know much about him. Maybe they know nothing about him. Real quick, what can we expect to hear?
Yeah, Joe, I'm told this isn't only J.D. Vance's first time speaking at a Republican convention, it's also his first time attending. He is that new on the national political scene. So expect to hear a lot about his biography, introducing himself to voters, and trying to provide some of that same permission structure I was talking about with Mr. Trump's former rivals. Vance was, of course, a very loud Trump critic as recently as 2016. Now he's a convert to the movement. He is going to be a big player to Donald Trump's base, and especially to the young men who the Trump campaign thinks are going to be their keys to winning. Now, the official theme tonight is Make America Strong Again, with a focus on foreign policy. But I do think it's more about introducing Vance than it is about any other consistent message that we're going to hear from the speakers tonight.
All right, Garrett, thank you so much.
Let's bring in NBC News International correspondent Janice McAfee to talk about the global reaction to all of this news. Janice, good morning. Let's start on Trump's pick for vice president. So Ohio Senator JD Vance, he's known to be kind of more isolationist in terms of members of the Republican Party. What does his nomination signal to international leaders about what could be in store if Trump is elected once again?
Well, in J.D. Vance, Donald Trump has somebody who will affirm his views on the world, on NATO, on Ukraine, on China. They are isolationist and put America first. And they widen a rift on foreign policy within the Republican Party by confirming this tilt away from the old guard when it comes to foreign policy. Vance is skeptical of U.S. support for Ukraine. He is opposed to continued funding. Like Trump, they don't see Vladimir Putin as a threat to Europe or the U.S., which is sending a shudder through Europe. On Israel, they are both on side with Israel, saying that they will help, quote, get the job done. This is the one foreign policy point that has wide support across the party. And they are both equally as blunt on China, in seeing China as a major competitive threat to the U.S. Look, J.D. Vance is not a counterbalance to Donald Trump's worldview, and nor is he likely to contradict him. What remains to be seen is the extent to which Trump will listen to J.D. Vance on foreign policy if they're elected in November.
Janice, let's focus on Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's willing to work with Trump if the former president is elected in November. Critics worry another Trump administration would mean a huge shift in U.S. policy when it comes to Ukraine and the European Union. So what do we know about where both Vance and Trump stand on the future of funding to Ukraine, especially amid the war with Russia?
Well, they are both pushing for a settlement in the war in Ukraine, even if it means conceding territory to Russia, and even if it's viewed by other countries as a victory for Vladimir Putin. So, yes, there would be a huge shift for Ukraine and for Europe, and that would resonate in other regions of the world that wouldn't mind seeing a NATO defeat. Vance said in a podcast, quote, "I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another." He's firm in the belief that the U.S. is already stretched too thin. Volodymyr Zelensky said this week that he still believes that most of the Republican Party still supports Ukraine, and that he's not afraid of working with a second Trump administration. But for European leaders who had already been preparing for a changed relationship with the U.S., they're now buckling up. With J.D. Vance declaring that the U.S. would shift its focus away from Europe and toward China, because there would be trade fallout with that as well.
Janice, of course, the relationship between the U.S. and China hangs in the balance here as well. We know Trump has a record of being tough on China when it comes to trade. Do we expect any of his policies to change this time around?
Well, It basically doesn't matter who's in the White House come next year. There is a very rough U.S.-China relationship, and it's not likely to grow any warmer under a second Trump administration. Vance and Trump are both talking about huge tariffs on all Chinese goods. Their concern is competition. Quote, this is Vance. If we're going to lose a war, it will be because we have allowed our primary rival to become arguably our most powerful industrial competitor. There's also the argument here, a couple of points to make, that China would welcome a second Trump presidency because they function on transactional diplomacy and transactional trade. And with China, they know where they stand with Trump. There's also, doesn't seem to be any guarantee the extent to which a Biden administration would want the U.S. to involve itself in Taiwan if China were to make a move, as President Trump says, unless Taiwan pays for its own defense. And just lastly, there is the sense here that maybe a second Trump administration would hold the U.S. back. As one strategist described to me, it would, quote, make America unsuccessful again. Joe and Savannah.
Janice Mackey-Frayer, thank you very much. And NBC News Now will have coverage of Day 3 of the Republican National Convention throughout the day, of course, and our extensive live coverage begins at 4 p.m. Eastern. VP nominee JD Vance will address the convention tonight. That will get underway after 9 p.m. Eastern, and you can watch it here on NBC News Now as well as on NBC.
We want to turn to the other major story of the week, the attempted assassination of former President Trump. Let's bring in NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley for the latest on the investigation. So, Julia, NBC News is learning that before Saturday's shooting, security around Mr. Trump was increased in recent weeks. It's because of intelligence the U.S. obtained about an alleged Iranian plot to kill him. We do understand this is not linked to Saturday's assassination. Still, what are we hearing from U.S. officials about this threat, and what is Iran saying?
That's right. We don't believe that Crooks was in any way linked to this Iranian threat, but there's a lot of scrutiny around what the threats around Mr. Trump, the former president, are because of this attempted assassination. And what the White House is saying is that they've received a number of tips that they've passed along to the Trump campaign, to Trump, about Iran wanting to threaten Trump. The thing Iran is saying is that they want to get their justice just through the election. They think that Trump will be defeated in November, and that their justice, though, is all about Trump ordering the assassination of General Soleimani in Iran. So this is all what it centers around. We also can't remove the fact that a future Trump administration would meet a much more hawkish approach toward Iran. His former national security advisor was John Bolton, someone who basically wanted to obliterate Iran. This is an administration that is not friendly to Iran. Not that we've had many friendly administrations from the U.S. to the Iranians, but this was a threat that they saw escalating. The other thing to look at, just from a law enforcement perspective, is, yes, Secret Service somehow increased their coverage around and added more to Trump's Secret Service detail. What does that look like? Because as we know, there's a lot of scrutiny about what Secret Service did not have prepared going into Saturday, which is why this gunman was able to make this shot anyway. So if this is increased security, what did decreased security look like?
It's a great question, Julia, one I'm sure are on the minds of a lot of people at home. Where do things stand with that investigation into the gunman behind Saturday's attempted assassination? Any closer to learning a motive?
Into the gunman, still not a lot of information. I've been speaking with some folks who said that, you know, they were able to obtain his phone. They're going through that. They're going through receipts, seeing things he might have been interested in, his Google searches. These are all things that you would typically find from someone plotting such an assassination. But it seems that he was someone who was previously pretty quiet. He was a registered Republican. It doesn't seem that he had a big online presence posting about how he didn't like Donald Trump. It's really quite shocking how little information he shared publicly about his political views. Some people who knew him growing up say he was bullied in school. He was a quiet person, but not a lot of warning signs that Crooks was about to make this drastic move.
Julia, you mentioned scrutiny. There are still a lot of unanswered questions about how local law enforcement and the Secret Service operated in the lead up to the shooting, especially when it came to securing the roof the shooter was on. Anything new about that?
That's right. I mean, in the beginning, the first 24 hours after this shooting, we saw Secret Service, especially their spokespeople, point a lot of fingers at local law enforcement, saying that this was outside of the Secret Service perimeter, this roof that Crooks got his position on, and so that essentially fell to local law enforcement. But since then, they've had to take more responsibility, saying that ultimately the plan and all of the security to keep a protectee like Trump safe falls to the Secret Service. Here's what the director told ABC about how the buck stops with her.
This is an event that should have never happened.
Who is most responsible for this happening?
What I would say is that the Secret Service is responsible for the protection of the former president.
So the buck stops with you?
The buck stops with me. That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, you know, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. And so, you know, the decision was made to secure the building from inside.
A little surprising that they wouldn't want to put someone up on a sloped roof. If you've seen videos of Crooks actually crawling up this roof, it doesn't look to be particularly sloped. And now we're trying to figure out who exactly that local law enforcement is. There were a number of state and local agencies responsible that day. Now there are a lot of questions about who exactly would have been able to have purview of that building and where exactly the communication went wrong. We know they were looking for him in the crowd. Secret Service knew local law enforcement were looking for a suspicious person. How was he able to get up on that roof really for so long and be able to get into that crucial and critical and fatal for some position?
Still so many unanswered questions. Julia Ainsley, thank you so much.
Well, here in New York City, a jury found New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez guilty on all counts in his federal corruption trial on Monday. The jurors deliberated for roughly 12 and a half hours over 3 days before convicting Menendez on 16 charges, including bribery, extortion, and acting as a foreign agent to aid the governments of Egypt and Qatar.
Senator Menendez is scheduled to be sentenced in October, but following his conviction, calls for him to resign are increasing within his own party. Joining us now to discuss the verdict, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos.
Good morning to both of you. Ryan, let's get started with you. What else can you tell us about this verdict and what we are now hearing from Menendez?
Yeah, so the jury was really dealing with some, pretty overwhelming evidence in this case, including some of those really famous photos of those gold bars and that cash that was found at Senator Menendez's home. But Senator Menendez is pushing back even after this jury verdict. A jury of his peers convicted him. Here's what he said. He said, "I am deeply disappointed by the jury's decision. I have every faith that the law and the facts did not sustain that decision and that will be successful upon appeal." And that we will be successful upon appeal. I have never violated my public oath. I have never been anything other than a patriot of my country and for my country. So some strong words there from Senator Menendez.
Danny, let's talk exactly what Ryan was talking about there. You've got those strong... Oh, is there a soundbite? Sorry.
Do we have sound?
Do we have a soundbite? No, okay.
You have
me.
That's all.
Apologies. We'll have you talk
machine,
instead.
Danny.
I mean, what was your reaction to the verdict? I mean, those images of the gold bars were so strong. Is this what you expected?
I couldn't agree with you more. You see those images of the gold bars there. They were the star of this case, not Menendez, but those gold bars. And government prosecutors are very good at their job. They know evidence like that is very sticky. You see the gold bars there. And for many of us, we're looking at that saying, oh, that's what gold bars look like, because we don't deal in gold bars. If you're looking at that and saying, wow, hadn't seen one of those before, you're not alone.
Small.
It's smaller than I thought. There's a 1 ouncer. I've never been paid in gold bars. It's something that most of us don't see, and the government knows that was going to be a piece of evidence that was going to take center stage and be very sticky for the jury, because it's even more shocking, I guess I would say, than bundles of cash. And by the way, even the cash was incriminating here, because Menendez introduced evidence that there was he only took out increments of $400. In fact, the government introduced that evidence, and yet he had the cash bundled in $10,000 stacks. That doesn't seem like incrementally taking out $400 over time. we wouldn't go home and then bundle these into the $10,000 stacks. So even the cash was incriminating. And the bottom line is these cases are very difficult to defend because the government doesn't need a written contract between both sides saying, hey, here's our quid pro quo. Instead, they show all the goodies that each side received, all the benefits, and they let the jury draw the inference.
Ryan, let's talk about what this means now. I mean, first job, 40 Senate Democrats have called on Menendez to resign. Complicating this, of course, is that he's running for re-election, but as an independent. With a potential threat of being expelled, is there any precedent for him to be removed from office?
There are ways to remove him, but it's not sort of an automatic thing just because he was convicted in this case. So it's something that is going to really have to go through the process here. And it's really just sort of public pressure that would be sort of forcing him or pushing him to step away. Of course, Andy Kim is the Democratic nominee in New Jersey and is favored to win, even with Senator Menendez on the ballot. But there's still this push from Andy Kim to get Senator Menendez to step down, to leave sort of no question about where this would go, because typically in New Jersey, even though parts of the state are pretty red, it is a Democratic state. Let me read a statement from Senator Schumer here saying, in light of this guilty verdict, Senator Menendez should now do what is right for his constituents, the Senate, and our country, and resign. So obviously there's this big push right now to get Senator Menendez out, but there's no indications at the moment, especially in light of that statement from Senator Menendez saying he plans to appeal this, that he's going to step aside right away.
So, Danny, he is sentenced on October 29th. That's what's scheduled to be right now. He, of course, will appeal the verdict. This is a non-violent crime, but he was convicted on all counts. So what kind of sentence could he be facing here? And also just remind us, what does this appeals process look like?
Joe, I knew you had a defense attorney in you somewhere. You're thinking on all the important points. He is a first-time offender, non-violent. This is a white-collar type crime. That doesn't mean he isn't facing real time, because the loss amounts in white-collar type crimes can boost your sentence, your recommended sentencing guidelines range into the stratosphere. But depending on what that loss amount is, Menendez may have an argument for a probation-only sentence. It might be a long shot, but ever since a case from over a decade ago by the Supreme Court, the sentencing guidelines are only advisory. So really, in theory, every criminal defendant has a chance at a probation-only sentence. He will appeal. I don't know really what the major appealable issues would be so far. I haven't seen a whole lot in this area. Again, these are really tough cases to win and tough cases to appeal.
Ryan Riley, Danny Ceballos, thank you both very much.
It is another day of summer extremes with the relentless heat wave and powerful storms sweeping across the country. Today, from the plains to the East Coast, 92 million people are scorching under heat alerts. Well, across the Midwest, thousands are without power after severe storms, and multiple tornadoes swept through that region. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett has the latest.
Back-to-back nights of tornado sirens wailing through Chicago.
That's one.
The National Weather Service confirming 8 tornadoes touching down in the Midwest, at least one hitting downtown Chicago. Severe storms flipping semi-trucks and knocking down power lines.
The amount of tornadoes that occurred at the same time in a concentrated area, that was unprecedented.
The lines shutting down a portion of the highway. A woman killed in Cedar Lake, Indiana, after a tree fell on her home.
So this fell down Sunday night, and you can see the whole root. It doesn't...
The entire stump is out.
Yeah.
Leaving nearly 150,000 people without power. Travelers sheltering in place at O'Hare Airport. Some, like Justin Smolensky, stuck on their plane on the runway through the tornado warnings as air traffic control was evacuated, according to the FAA.
I mean, it was turbulence on the ground. My kids were terrified.
With cleanup ongoing across the region, the threat continues. A dam in Nashville, Illinois, failing due to the storm's rainfall. Residents ordered to evacuate. The electric company hopes to have power restored by Wednesday afternoon, but it's warning some residents they may have to wait until Friday. Back to you.
Maura Barrett, thank you so much.
Well, for more on this seemingly endless summer of heat, let's get a check on your morning news now weather.
NBC meteorologist Violetta Yaz is with us. Violetta, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yes, it has been a busy couple of days, or the heat extending longer than a week in some spots, but it's also been pretty stormy, too, across the Midwest in particular. As of late, we, of course, had that derecho that moved through Chicago. Still very stormy last night here, generally south of St. Louis. You can see storms are ongoing here across Arkansas, extending into parts of Oklahoma. Now, that thunderstorm complex happening at the tail end of this front that's actually going to bring some stormy weather toward the northeast and mid-Atlantic later today as well. So this is going to be the focal point for severe weather. We'll have this cold front move in. You can see this is more so going to be a late afternoon and evening threat. Here's 8 o'clock. You can see those storms approaching New York, and we'll see that stretch from parts of Virginia all the way up in through New Hampshire. Now, the good news is that front is going to bring those temperatures down a little bit, but as long as folks in Atlanta and the southeast in general stay out ahead of that front, that heat and humidity is going to continue. So it'll be cooler north of the front. Meanwhile, the heat and humidity will continue across parts of the southeast where it'll stay stormy as well. So here's that main threat for later this afternoon and evening. From right around Richmond into interior sections of New England, 48 million people at risk. Damaging winds and large hail going to be the main concerns there. Tornado risk relatively low. These storms should be pretty fast moving. And of course, now switching to the heat, 82 million people impacted. We have some scattered heat alerts, but a little more concentrated here along the eastern seaboard from Boston and New England all the way down through the mid-Atlantic. We'll see excessive heat develop yet again around the Philadelphia metro area. So something to keep in mind here through the course of this afternoon. It is still going to be sweltering out there with temperatures pretty comfortably into the 90s, heat indices into the triple digits. But then we do start to see that relief as we head into tomorrow. I bet you never thought that 80s would sound good, right? That's where we're at with it. Tomorrow it'll cool down a little bit. I think the humidity will also be noticeable as well. That will be a big improvement. Temperatures do come up a little bit again for the weekend, but not quite as high as what we've been seeing the last couple of days. And I do think with that lower humidity, it'll make a big difference. Saturday, dew points into the 60s, much more comfortable than the 70s that we've been seeing. So we're in this very summer-like pattern, the dog days of summer. It is stifling out there. I think everybody is ready for a little bit of relief here over the course of the
heat wave's been, what, 4 or 5 months now, I feel like?
Pretty much. All year. All year
exactly.
in some spots.
It's nice to see 2 digits instead of 3 digits.
Exactly. We
when
love
we're talking about a temperature. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.